The colony on Varith 7 had learned to respect the storms. Every solar cycle, when the twin suns aligned, the crimson deserts would rise up in fury, swallowing entire settlements beneath waves of iron-rich sand. The colonists, a mixture of species from across the Galactic Union, had built their habitats deep, with reinforced walls and atmospheric shields that could withstand the bombardment. But the Krivesh cubs had wandered too far. Leora Venn stood at the edge of the designated safe zone, her environmental suit's sensors screaming warnings into her helmet. The storm was minutes away, a churning wall of darkness that stretched from ground to sky, blotting out the crimson light of both suns. Behind her, the evacuation alarms wailed their final countdown. "Leora, you need to get inside now!" Commander Ocean's voice crackled through her comm, distorted by electromagnetic interference from the approaching tempest. She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on the small tracking beacon flickering on her wrist display. 4 life signs, small and terrified, huddled in a shallow ravine 300 meters beyond the perimeter. The Krivesh younglings had been playing near the cliff edges, chasing the bioluminescent beetles that emerged before storms. Now they were trapped. "There are cubs out there," Leora said, her voice steady despite the wind beginning to claw at her suit. "The Krivesh adults are already inside," Ocean replied, his tone strained. "They've accepted—" "I haven't," Leora ran. The other species in the colony had long ago accepted certain calculations. When the storms came, you sealed the doors. Those caught outside were mourned, remembered, but not pursued. The mathematics of survival were simple. Risk 1 life to save 4 children, and you might lose 5. Risk 5 to save 4, and the colony weakens. The Krivesh, reptilian beings whose scales shimmered like copper in sunlight, understood this arithmetic of necessity. Humans, Leora had learned, were terrible at math when children were involved. The wind hit her like a physical wall. Sand particles, each one sharp as broken glass and moving at hundreds of kilometers per hour, began to pelt her suit. The impact sensors registered yellow, then orange. Her visor's display flickered as micro-abrasions scratched across its surface. 300 meters felt like 3,000. The ravine appeared suddenly, a gash in the desert floor where water had once carved through stone eons ago. Leora dropped to her knees at the edge, her suit's lights cutting through the rising dust. Below, she could barely make out the small shelter the cubs had tried to create, a pathetic overhang of rock that was already half buried. "I'm coming!" she shouted, though she knew they couldn't hear her over the storm's roar. The slope was steep. Leora half slid, half fell down the ravine wall, using her gloved hands to break against the stone. Her suit registered multiple tears in the outer layer. The backup layer would hold, for now. By the time she reached the bottom, the storm had arrived in full force. The world disappeared into a howling red nightmare. Visibility dropped to less than a meter. Her suit's AI began calculating her odds of survival if she stayed exposed. She dismissed the notification without reading it. The cubs were completely buried. Only her scanner's life sign detection could locate them beneath the rapidly accumulating sand. 4 signals clustered together, growing weaker. Leora began to dig. Her gloves, designed for technical work and equipment handling, were never meant for this. Within seconds, the reinforced fingertips began to shred against the abrasive sand. Warning icons bloomed across her visor. Suit integrity compromised, atmospheric seal breached in extremities, oxygen consumption accelerating. She kept digging. The sand was heavy, waterlogged with the storm's moisture. Each handful weighed more than it should. The wind fought her, refilling every scoop she excavated. Leora dug faster, her movements becoming frantic. Blood began to seep through her torn gloves, turning the red sand darker. Her hands struck something solid, not rock, but flesh. Scales. "Got you," she gasped. With both hands, she carved through the sand around the shape, revealing a small reptilian head. Yellow eyes blinked up at her, vertical pupils dilating in terror and confusion. The cub's mouth opened in a silent cry. Tavrik. She recognized him from the colony creche, the smallest of the clutch, barely 2 solar cycles old. Leora grabbed him by the shoulders and pulled. The sand released him reluctantly, and he came free in a shower of red particles. She clutched him against her chest, feeling him tremble against her suit. 3 more signals remained. She set Tavrik down on a partially sheltered ledge and returned to digging. Her hands were numb now, the cold of Vareth Seven's atmosphere seeping through the breaches in her gloves. The suit's medical systems had stopped warning her about the lacerations. There were too many to count. The second cub came free after 2 minutes of desperate excavation, then the third. Each one she pulled from the sand and placed with Tavrik, watching them huddle together in terrified silence. The fourth signal was the deepest. Leora's vision was beginning to blur. Blood loss, the suit's AI informed her helpfully. Oxygen reserves at 18%. Recommend immediate evacuation. She dismissed the notification and dug deeper. Her fingers struck scales, then lost purchase, as numbness claimed them entirely. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Couldn't tell if she was even gripping anything. Operating on instinct and stubbornness alone, she hooked her arms under the buried cub's body and heaved backward. The cub emerged in a rush, and Leora fell back into the sand, clutching the youngster to her chest. 4 cubs, all alive, all breathing. Getting them back up the ravine wall would be impossible in the storm. Leora's legs were shaking, her hands useless. The atmospheric pressure had dropped to dangerous levels, and the temperature was plummeting toward Vareth Seven's nighttime baseline, cold enough to freeze exposed flesh in minutes. She gathered all 4 cubs against her, arranging them in the shelter of her body. The overhang above them provided minimal protection, but it was something. Leora activated her suit's emergency beacon and wrapped herself around the youngsters as tightly as she could manage with ruined hands. "Stay together," she murmured, though they couldn't understand her words. "I've got you." The storm raged around them for 6 hours. When the rescue team finally reached the ravine, guided by Leora's beacon, they found her unconscious but alive, hypothermic and barely breathing. All 4 Krivesh cubs were nestled against her, their body heat preserved by her own sacrifice. Commander Ocean carried her back himself. Later, when Leora woke in the medical bay, her hands wrapped in regenerative tissue, she found Tavrik's mother standing beside her bed. The Krivesh female's copper scales gleamed in the artificial light, and her vertical pupils were wide with emotion humans were still learning to read. "Your species," she said slowly, her translator rendering her clicks and hisses into standard, "does not understand acceptable losses." Leora smiled weakly. "No," she agreed, "we really don't." The Krivesh mother placed a clawed hand gently on Leora's bandaged fingers. "We will remember this. When the Galactic Council calculates humanity's worth, when they weigh your usefulness against your chaos, your compassion against your recklessness." She paused, her eyes holding Leora's. "We will remember that you dug through a storm with bare hands for children that were not your own." That night, the colony's records were updated. Under the file marked Human Behavioral Patterns, a new note was added. "Will disregard all rational survival protocols when young are in danger. Recommend never leaving human personnel responsible for evacuation procedures. Also recommend never going into danger without them." Tavrik would grow up to become the first Krivesh ambassador to Earth, where he would tell anyone who would listen about the storm, the sand, and the human who simply refused to let go.